Hello. Suppose we want to know if a certain artificial substance that's like a food coloring or any number of other things, an artificial sweetener, has some negative effects. There might be some suspicion that it causes cancer, maybe certain kinds of cancer, based on what we call anecdotal evidence. Just it appears to be going on, just casual observations. Typically what we do in modern times to answer all kinds of different questions in medicine, health, psychology, on and on and on and on, is data is collected and then a statistical test is run to see if there's really a difference. Tests like the t-test, ANOVA, regression analysis, even if you don't know what those words mean and they make your eyes glaze over, they are statistical tests. They are, you might say, bread and butter tests. They've been used for decades. They're well established, and they continue to be used day in and day out. We hear all about artificial intelligence, all these cool, exciting things happening. These standard tests are being used all the time to tell us whether there is a relationship between things, how the world works. They're fundamental. And I'm going to be making a series of videos on how I use these kinds of tests to determine if certain things work or not in the world. Just like thousands or probably millions of other people do. Now, there's a problem with these tests, a big problem, or we thought mathematicians, research methodologists, we, the human family, thought that there was a big problem with these tests. It ends up the problem's not there. And some people still believe that the problem's there. And I just want to make it clear that the problem is not there. We are free to use these tests in most situations. The problem that at one time we thought there was is that the data, the people who are consuming this artificial sweetener, artificial coloring, and some of them have a particular illness and some do not. This data that we're collecting, it was assumed or it was understood for a long time that that data had to have that nice bell curve. You've seen this bell curve for height, weight, all kinds of things. Normally distributed data. It ends up, and I want to just make this clear, that as long as you have 40, 50, 60 cases, people that you're studying, the data does not need to be normal. Really, any distribution is okay. So as researchers and mathematicians study this more carefully, they found out, oh my gosh, it's fine if the data is not normally distributed. This is fantastic because it means that this extreme restriction, this very important requirement, and a lot of data is not normally distributed. It's a little skewed, it's a little tilted, you might say, or maybe hugely tilted, or tremendously skewed. It's just not normal in many different ways. It's perfectly okay. Relax, it's fine. So I just want to make that point, and I'm going to give a little documentation of this so that it's clear, because this is huge. It means that in all the investigations we're doing, as long as you have, say, 50 or more cases that you're studying, no worries, go for it. You can use these very powerful, useful tests, easy to run, widely available, very informative, very confidently. So, here we go. So, as I have here in highlighted text here, recent research, however, shows that in many cases, the data does not need to be normally distributed. In many cases, like almost all cases, as long as you have enough data, it's fine. So to give you an idea of this transition, I'm just going to document this to make it clear that this is really something that has been believed. Occasionally you still hear people saying it, But we now know it's not true. It's not true that the data has to be normally distributed. Here's an article that says to use these tests like t-tests and ANOVA, the data has to have this normal distribution. Tests like t-tests and ANOVA that require specific distribution called a normal distribution are called parametric tests. A fancy word so that we can just label it. They're called parametric tests. And to quote from this article written in 2008, parametric tests assume a normal distribution of values or the bell-shaped curve. For example, the height is roughly a normal distribution in that if you were to graph height from a group of people, one would see a typical bell-shaped curve. This distribution is also called a Gaussian distribution. So a normal distribution goes under various names. It's also called a Gaussian distribution. And parametric tests are in general more powerful than non-parametric tests. Okay, let me talk about power. Power means the ability of the test to detect an actual difference. So suppose that this artificial sweetener causes some physical problem. It does. That's an external fact of life. In research, we often assume there's an external world that's really there, and there are things going on whether we are aware of it or not. So does this artificial sweetener cause certain results? There's evidence, for example, that artificial sweeteners can increase obesity. Is that true or not? How do we find out? So a statistical test tells you, and power has a specific meaning in research methodology. Power means the ability of the test to detect it. If there is a relationship where this artificial sweetener is increasing some problem, such as obesity, if that's true, can the statistical test and the research methods detect that? The ability to detect it is called the power of the test. And parametric tests are very powerful. They're good at finding that relationship. However, it was thought the data had to have a nice normal distribution, and in the research I do, the data is usually not normally distributed. It's almost normal. It's a little bit skewed, and then you run these tests that tell you whether it's normal or not. They say, well, it's not really normal. It's a little off balance. Something's not quite right to be a nice normal distribution. You know, as of this article written in 2008, you would say, I cannot run that test. That test will give me false answers, and it will give what we call a type 1 error very often. It will tell you there's a difference when there isn't. Oh my God, that's bad news. Because now you think this artificial sweetener is correlated with obesity or cancer or whatever, and it isn't. And this huge mistake would be made because the data did not have a normal distribution. It ends up it's fine that it doesn't have a normal distribution. And these tests like t-tests and ANOVA and regression, they're powerful. They're able to find that difference. And it ends up we don't have to worry about the distribution. And that was the main limitation. So that's removed. So articles like this, and this is in ScienceDirect.com. This is a peer-reviewed academic journal saying, yes, it must be normally distributed. However, even though that article was written in 2008, and you will see articles even later saying the data has to be normally distributed, it was known going at least as far back as 2002. We already had academic articles, peer-reviewed articles in academic journals showing that, surprise, it ends up the data does not need to be normally distributed. And that as long as you have about 50 cases, you're fine. Some people will say 20, 30, whatever the number is. If you're looking at 100 or more cases, you're clearly doesn't matter what the distribution is. So in this article, published in 2002, they don't beat around the bush here. I mean, they state it very clearly. It is widely but incorrectly believed that the t-test and linear regression are valid only for normally distributed outcomes, right? That's what I just said. The t-test and linear regression compare the mean of an outcome variable for different subjects, While these are valid even in very small samples if the outcome variable is normally distributed, their major usefulness comes from the fact that, and I have this in bold, in large samples they are valid for any distribution. That's it. For large samples, they are valid for any distribution. And what do we mean by large? Large doesn't end up meaning thousands or tens of thousands. 50 or 60 is enough. That's considered to be a large sample in terms of this idea. And then they, in this research article, they demonstrate the validity of this by doing simulation. So simulation studies, you generate data that's not normal, and then you see what the t-test says, and you see if the relationship that actually exists between the variables is discovered. It ends up, it finds it just fine without increased type 1 errors, or we call type 2 errors. Type 2 error is when you don't detect a relationship that exists. Type 1 error is you think there's a relationship and there isn't, such as you think that artificial sweetener causes a problem. Type 1 error would be your analysis said there is, but actually there isn't. And that does happen. These tests are not perfect. They're just probability functions. And you increase confidence. There's no proof. There's no absolute knowledge. There's just confidence levels. And we want to be able to trust our tests that they're giving us actual, real probabilities, so we know what the confidence is. It ends up that these parametric tests work for data that's not normally distributed. And there are many articles. If you do a Google search, for information about this, you will find nice articles. Like here's an article from a paper called "Does My Sample Have to Be Normally Distributed for a T-Test?" Right? People are answering that's the same kind of question. T-test is a parametric test. This is my fellow Miroslav Tushev, a PhD in computer science. He's a data scientist at Amazon. And in this article, and I give the website address, he explains the theory, and he also does simulation studies to demonstrate that data does not have to have a normal distribution. So this is now well established and well known, but occasionally people still have not caught on to this realization, and they think you have to test the data to be normal. And as I said, this is a big deal, because even though we hear about AI and all these things as if they're taking over everything, those good old parametric tests like t-tests, ANOVA, and regression, they're fundamental, they're vitally important, they continue to be used for making discoveries, understanding how the world works. And that these tests work well for data that is extremely skewed or non-normal in any way means the door is open. You can proceed to do the research without this stumbling block that otherwise would weaken your ability to draw conclusions with greater confidence. So it's fantastic and lucky for us researchers that it's actually not a problem. And I already mentioned this, what the word power means, what a type 1 error is, what a type 2 error is. It's good to know that language. It's basic, like statistics 101 or research methods 101 type information, because that's how we talk about these things. That's how we understand what it is we're saying about these tests. So that's it. I just wanted to mention that I'm about to make a series of videos on some detailed research I'm doing. The first one is using ANOVA, and one of the first things people will sometimes say is, "Oh, did you test to see that it's normally distributed?" Actually, I don't have to do that. I did create the graph so we can see it. It's nice to know, but I just want to clear the air about that straight away. In the field that I'm in, people are still sometimes saying the data needs to be normally distributed, and not true, not for the sample sizes that we're working with. So, and by the way, if you're a subscriber, thank you very, very much. It helps tremendously. There's also a membership. Subscriber, of course, is free and helps support the station. You get notifications every time I make a new video. And membership is an option to have a monthly interactive question and answer with me, online Zoom meeting. You can meet once a month for $5. I call that the gold membership, or twice a month for $10. I call that the Platinum membership. And on this screen, there's 3 different ways you can become a member. So either through YouTube, through Patreon, or through my website, astrologydc.com. And there's the Patreon site, patreon.com/David Cochran. Okay, my friends. And, there are over 700 videos now. They are free. The payment is just to have interactive discussions with me, ask questions, address topics. But I'm going to continue to make more and more videos. All of it's free and accessible to everyone. Thank you very, very much for watching this video. God bless. Namaste.